Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf, a life and leadership podcast where we live out loud the pages of the books that are on our shelves, with your host, Denise Russo and Sam Powell.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is our life and leadership podcast where we're living out loud the pages of the books that are on our bookshelves. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here with my friend and co-host Sam Powell, and we are exploring the book Joy at Work by Marie Kondo. We're maybe about halfway through the book now. We're up to chapter 7, and I'm really looking forward to this chapter with you today. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's we're summertime now. It's feeling good.
It's feeling good. So this chapter today is leading us into talking about the people that we associate ourselves with and how to tidy up our networks. So I'm curious, what was maybe your number one takeaway from this chapter? It's kind of a short one, but it's a good one.
It is a short one to go on. And as someone who does a lot of networking online, who does a lot of networking at events and in person, this one really hit home for me. And we were talking before we hopped on that I'm working through a bit of a transition with my business. And this chapter really hit home for me because I think she lays out some great questions about thinking about your network, because really what she gets down to is it's sort of like quality over quantity type of a vibe here, and really thinking about, like, from a this is Joy at Work. So this is your professional network. Who really fits the bill for what you need in a professional network? And it doesn't mean you need 10,000 followers, on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. It means you need quality connections that help you in a specific way, right? And those can be lots of different ways from lots of different people. But I really think that for me, I took home this idea of what is the quality of my network, of my true network, versus the quantity of it. And right, what are those vanity metrics versus what are the real drivers of what success means to me?
I agree with you. I am looking at the aspect of what you just said on the social media side, because I see every day people say, like, oh, I just hit 25,000 followers. But then you look at their posts and there's maybe like only a couple of likes or something. There was somebody that was posting that's supposedly this influencer about like restaurants to go to at Disney World. I know, go figure, that's the ones I'm watching. But the person said that they were excited they had all this big amount of followers, but on that particular post it was barely nothing. And so
Yeah.
it is about quantity, not just the quality, I think, of what we're exploring together. And so when she's talking about how are you on a scavenger hunt to find the right and the best people, or do you already know who those people are? I was talking to Vincent the other day, even just about how sometimes in your work life, your friends that you make are from work because you're spending all your time at work. But when you're in an environment where you work remotely, then that becomes even more challenging. And so then people are communicating in LinkedIn. There's one other story I can think of this week that happened. So this lady had sent me a private note about, could I read this article that she wrote? And it's somebody that I knew at a former job, but I only knew her as a colleague, not as a friend. And so I thought, oh, interesting. The topic sounds interesting. And so I read it. And then I shared my feedback back with her. And then that's like where it stopped. And so it wasn't really intended to have a two-way conversation. It was almost like somebody that wanted to just get eyes on something they wrote, not to have a dialogue. And so for me, what this chapter speaks to is that if your relationships are important to you, then which ones are you investing time with versus wasting time with?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, reading this chapter and just listening to you tell that story, it reminds me of something I've heard Brene Brown say about herself a few times, is that she's a slow and close person. She likes to sit down and deeply have a conversation with just a few people, right? Like a few rich connections that have depth, that have that slowness to them, right? Like we're not speeding through the weather was great, this is wonderful, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I'm going to sit down and really take time. And I think about that a lot when I think about connections and relationships and things like that. Because I think fundamentally, a lot more of us are that, right? Like she says in this book, like we can only really handle 150 meaningful connections. Like that's what studies have shown. And I mean, 150 people is a lot of people. Like 150 meaningful connections is a lot of meaningful connections, but we tend to think about it in this weird digital world we live
Yeah.
in. And you and I
Yeah.
are both old enough to remember a time before the digital world of networks and connections and things like that, of like, yeah, you can't handle that many, that quantity, right? You want that slow, that close, that 150 real relationships that really, mean something at the end of the day. It reminds me too of I went to two different high schools growing up because we moved. And in the one, my graduating class was like 500 kids, and in the other, it was like I think a little less than 100. And in both cases, like I knew everybody in the school, right? But in the 500, I just knew names and faces, right? Like I could look through the yearbook and be like, and there was nobody who was surprising or I didn't know or come across at some point, right? Like 500 kind of surface level connections. But in the smaller school where there was less than 100, I still knew everybody, but I knew something real about them. And it's funny, when my brother graduated a couple years behind me, the person who I think it was his class president, gave a speech at graduation. And his speech was the best speech I've ever heard at a graduation because he went through every single person graduating and said one good thing about them, like one meaningful thing, one thing that he knew, right? And you can do that when you have this quality of connection. Like he was a really like great, like I knew him, they were 3 years younger than me, like nice kid, great kid, like real, charismatic. But his speech was literally him saying, like, I appreciate you. Like, you guys are great. And let me give you a specific reason for every single person why was essentially the whole thing. And I just sat there thinking, oh my gosh, what? What a meaningful speech. Like, that's the kind of network we're going for, right? Like, that's the kind of thing she's really encouraging us to do, is to be able to have those 100 people that are real, that are deep, that are meaningful, that like are that, hey, can you read this article for me? And then you have a dialogue on it instead of, can you read this article for me? And then I never hear from you again after I give you my thoughts and spend my time on it. Right. And like, that's really what we're looking for. And I love that you called it a scavenger hunt. That's so great. Perfect.
I was a band kid growing up. I know you were a sport kid growing up. And I think that there's something about being in organized groups of people that is so important. When I got to college, I went to a really, really big school. I went to the University of Florida. And one of the things they told us many years ago was if you don't get involved in something, you're going to get lost in this big environment. I even have friends that like went to New York City thinking they would make all these types of friends and became the loneliest people I know that weren't able to find networks. But if you are raised in these groups, whether it's youth soccer, baseball, football, basketball, band, whatever the youth organization is, you instantly get this community. And Vincent and I were talking about this the other day about how he went to a little bit smaller of a school than I did, not very much smaller, but a little bit smaller. And I recall many times Sam going on the campus to go visit him, and he knows everybody. So everybody we passed was like, hey Vincent, hi Vincent, how you doing, Vincent? Or tapping and doing all the stuff. And I was like, son, how do you just know everybody? You just know everybody. And yet he was looking at it from the lens of, yeah, I know everybody, but do I really know them? I have this core group that now that he graduated, he's missing this core group. And so when you're a recent college graduate, you start to have this struggle of losing this tight connection of these kids, especially if you're a kid who goes and lives in a dorm, because you leave home for the first time, you get adapted to being sort of like grown up, sort of, and then you leave. And it's a really interesting thing to see him experiencing that, because I am on this parallel pathway where you and I left a job that we were both at for over a decade, almost 2 decades. And that's where our core relationships, for the most part, we're obviously we both have friends outside of work, but your core everyday 9 to 5, 8 to 5, much longer work hours than that in real life, but the people that you're around the most. And when you lose that, you feel this untethered. And so this chapter, though, is important because it's taking a proactive stance. Like, how do you tidy up the networks you currently have so that you can clear the space from the networks that aren't maybe adding value to you or that you're not adding value to yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're that transition that Vincent said now is, I think, one of the hardest ones because you're dictated to, right, your whole life through school, through organizations, through all this activity of like, hey, here's people around the same age, in the same things, in the same organizations, activities as you. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into the real world of
Mhm.
like, hey, go figure it out. And that there is this like sense of like, who am I? Who is my group? Who are my people? Where are they? How do I find them? And I think that especially people graduating right now, it's even harder than it was, right? There's so much, like the job market is rough. There's so much virtual work versus in person. There's just a lot that makes it really, really difficult to connect in the space
Mhm.
and sort of build that foundation, because you're right, like you and I were at these companies, but the company that we came from was the job I started in when I was Vincent's age, right? Like I graduated from college and I moved to work at this company that then later got bought by another company, and all the sort of corporate growth you go through. But the the people that I married one of the people that was on that original team.
Yeah.
We've been to the weddings and the baby showers of the people who were there, right? It became another community because again, it was a whole bunch of people, same
Yeah.
sort of age, filling that, right? And these are people who like, yeah, would do anything for, right? Like they are quality people in my network and in my connections. And like from her perspective, right in the book, like they spark joy
Yeah.
in me, right? Like these are people that like if I was listing everyone out and going through the names, which is one of the things she suggests, like they would spark joy and they would absolutely be in the keep category because we've had those moments of connection. We've built that foundation. And so she talks in this about like I think two things that were really really big helpful, like really helpful, is one, how to evaluate your network, and two, also how to build good connections, because I think
Mhm.
sometimes we get a little bit lost, right, when the naturalness, right, like of the world Vincent is coming from, or people who've worked, at a place, especially in person, right, with people, like you're just naturally around people all day long. And so you take for granted that, these are real skills and there can be some intentionality to going and building out a network. And so I think her two frameworks here are really good. So the first one, which is really identifying your joy sparking relationships, is she broke it down really into, I think, good questions. And these are really her fundamental questions that she asks kind of over and over again as we're tidying up our work life. But, the first one is, which connections do I need for my job? Right? Like that pretty like who do I have to keep around here? Your boss. You have to have a connection with your boss, right? Like who are the people that you really need in the roles that you have? And then which connection can help me advance my work-life vision? And like I think you and I as coaches, right, are all about that. What is the vision? What is the goal? What is the thing here that we're trying to accomplish? And throughout this book, that's a lot of it, right? Like, what do I want to get out of work? What really is the point here for me? And who can help me further that vision, right? We've been talking a lot about the what can help me further that vision, and this is the who part of it. And then which connections really do bring you joy, right? Like which of my friends that I made 20 years ago, are the ones that really, really spark joy, and who are the people that you want to spend time with. And I think that that's an easy framework, right? Easy three-question framework when you're looking at your network to really think about who are the people you need and want around you when it comes to work.
I actually highlighted the ones that came right after that. And maybe it's just because I think, evolved a lot in my older years of being at work than I did in my younger times. In my younger times, I think I looked at work colleagues as who can I learn from, what can I get from them, and what can I do for them. And the
Mhm.
older I get, I feel like it's way more around how do I feel when I'm around that person. So I
Mhm.
highlighted in the book where she says, these questions. Do I smile when I think of this person? And would I be happy to see them soon? And in the margins, I literally put your name and a couple others that you know that we mutually know. And instantly, when I think of you, I don't think I think of you as a work colleague, even though we had the blessing of meeting at
Mhm.
work. And so I actually this week was I got in touch with this person that I had worked with 20 years ago on an event, and we were the closest of close during that period of my life and time. It was right when Olivia was very little and Vincent had just been born, and she had a child that was like right between the age of both of my kids. And so we were kind of like growing up as brand new moms together and doing this really cool, amazing, life changing, very meaningful event together. But a long time we lost touch. And so it just turns around full circle. I think I was sharing with you the project I'm working on right now. I ended up taking because there was a man I had worked with about 30 years ago that I just admired from a work perspective. He brought me joy, and he was also somebody I truly admired. And so I went for a job simply because that man worked at the place where I wanted to work. And I didn't even think about the monumentalness of this place I'm working. I just wanted to be around that person because
Yeah.
that person brought me joy. Well, so this other person that I grew up with the kids being little found out I was working now at this place where this other person was working. And she reached out to me and said, I feel like it's time for me to reconnect because I'm interested if there's any opportunities. So we ended up talking yesterday about different opportunities and such. I was telling her about, well, there's this team and there's this other team and there's this kind of work and that kind of work. And then she paused, and it was such an honor to me. She just said, I'm team Denise. Like when I saw you were there, the first thing I thought was, I want to be there because you're there. And I was so
Mm.
moved by it because that's like how I felt about this other person, which was the reason I came to where I am.
Yeah.
On the flip side, the job is really cool and the work is really awesome. But I think at the end of the day, if you're doing work for the sakes of just work and you're not doing it to move through your life with people, then are you
Yeah.
making your time count? Because work,
Mm.
as we know from being in organizations that transition, transform, lay off, and hire and fire, you are an expendable resource. And so the way you relate to your network is so crucial. There's a part in the book right after this where even she starts talking about LinkedIn and how you use your social networks. And I'm starting to find, Sam, that people are blending strangely between how they communicate like on Facebook versus in LinkedIn, and they're like getting mixed now. And I don't know if you're
Mhm.
seeing this as well, but I'm seeing
Yeah.
posts of people saying like, I'm having chest pains because I lost my job or my dog died. And these are things I would normally think you would see like with your core group of friends on Facebook, but you're seeing
Mhm.
it now in LinkedIn because people maybe have lost this sense of they don't have a close network. Like, who are they communicating with, or are they just seeking affirmation from an audience that may say, "Oh, I feel bad for you," but do they even know you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there's, right. I think that goes back to like this fundamental part of being human of we take the path of least resistance. We are wired, like, we've studied, you and I've studied this so much over the last few years. Like, we are wired to find the shortcut, to find the easiest path to whatever, right? Usually it's the easiest path to avoid pain. And relationships inherently have struggles to them, right? Like real, meaningful, deep relationships have conflict, have friction, have a little bit of that rub sometimes, that disappointment, that we're just not on the same wavelength right now, really. But online relationships are just as whatever you make them to be,
Yeah.
right? They don't have to have that depth to them. And so you can pour things out without any of that real backlash that the uncomfortableness that we're avoiding so often. And so, yeah, I see the same thing all the time where it's like people are, sharing whatever. And I struggle to, like, as someone who posts online, who does, do this as part of, my job, I struggle with this sometimes. Like, what's the level of sharing? What's the conversation I really want to be having? What does that really look like that's authentic, but
Yeah.
is, but is not the full-fledged deep version of me that like you get when we're off camera, and things like that, right? And I think that's a hard thing, and I don't know that we've got real good answers for it because in the grand scheme of humanity, social media is a baby, like not even an infant, right? Or like a day old maybe. It's,
Right.
we're figuring it out still.
We were talking before we got started about these social influencer kind of people.
Mhm.
And Marie Kondo talks about how are you really building a network or just accumulating a bunch of loose associations? Now, I know that
Yeah.
these people have the intent to appear like they care about you somehow, even though they don't know who you are because they're trying to make money from it. And I think that that is where it becomes less authentic. And so when you think about your associations and you think about the networks you're building, you were telling me a couple weeks ago about how LinkedIn had changed an algorithm of sorts, like who's going to see your stuff,
Mhm.
etc., which is so lame. I'm sorry. I wish somebody from LinkedIn would listen to this podcast because the way that it has changed now, people that I know would get value from what we're sharing, like on this show, aren't seeing it anymore. And you were telling me about how I think the algorithm was like, you have to not just like somebody else's post, but you have to interact with other people's posts. You have to comment on the other posts. And I think the point is maybe well taken that it's about having good quality communication, but people aren't doing it for that. They're
Right.
going out and figuring out, okay, well, if I could trick the system, I just go like and comment and I'll just use AI to make my comment. There's this friend of mine that lives in another country. And so he was posting on my post almost every day. And so finally I was like, how do you have time to answer and post on all of my things and comment? And he said, oh, I have no idea. I don't do that. It automatically is sending like these notes. Those aren't even from me. And then I thought, well, geez, then why are you even like in my feed?
Yeah. 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 And that's, I mean, that's, I think what's complicating this world of connection too, is with AI coming in, like it's an interesting ball game to navigate when you look at it through the lens of connection, because
Mhm.
you can one automate and fake connection, right? Like you can fake posts and like you didn't have any hand in that really. Like you can train it to write like you, but that wasn't actually you, right? And so there's that depth is really missing there. And you can log on to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your chatbot of choice
Yeah,
and have what feels like a real conversation, and
yeah.
it's not. And you have to keep that perspective of this isn't real, right? Like this isn't a person sitting across from me. This isn't that. And so again, like when we're taking through that lens of like we're always going to find the path of least resistance, the path that avoids pain, those things make it so easy, right? It's why it's so appealing to hang out in those spaces and to do that, but where things really happen. And, like I can tell you as someone who's been a career coach for the last few years specifically, every single person who's landed a job that I've worked with has been through a connection.
Mm.
And it and people don't want to hear that because they want to hear that I can log on, I can use this AI tool, I can do
Mhm.
whatever to apply and make things easy, right? Avoid all that pain of rejection and the struggle of feeling awkward in, reaching out to somebody and doing whatever. Like I have people and I tell them this up front, like if you want to work with me, it is going to be about connection. It is going to be about working on your network. And I have people who are just out right then because they don't want to do it. And and they're not the right fit for me as a coach either. But every single person I've worked with, and the reason I do that is because every single person that I've worked with in mid-career who's landed a role, especially senior roles, is all through real connections. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not that real connection hiring them, it's their real connection putting them through somewhere else, right?
Mhm.
It's the depth of that furthering a conversation, of moving it forward. And as much as we want to pretend it's easier than that, it's not. There's no shortcut really, at the end of the day. And when she goes on to talk about how to build high quality connections, she talks about a few things. She talks about four things specifically, but one is you have to be present in the connection, like real presence. You have to help other people do their best work, right? These are work relationships. How can you help somebody be the best and do the best version of whatever they do? Third, be open and trust others. And I love that because we always think about trust as like we want people to trust us. But when I train leaders on trust, it's always about you got to give trust first, and then trust comes back to you. Trust is a give before it's ever a take. And so I love that she talks about that is really being open and trusting other people in the situation. You've got to be a little vulnerable here if you want to build real meaningful connections. And then fourth, which I love from my like sports background and lenses, is encouraging play, right? And this is really encouraging fun and creativity and experimentation and like just be a little goofy together, right? Like let's do that, right? And the weird thing I thought about when I read this one was it had to have been like 20 years ago at this point that I saw something or read something somewhere that was talking about like, do humans have mating calls? Like birds or, other things have mating calls. And they're like, do humans? And the argument was that yes, we do. And it's laughter. Laughter is our mating call. And as someone who's always loved funny people, my husband's very funny and very witty. And like, I think it's true. And I think about who are the people I really resonate with. When do I feel really good? It's like when I make someone laugh or when someone makes me laugh, right? Like there's that connection part of it. But if you don't encourage play in the relationship you have with somebody, you never get to that laughter and you never get to that kind of connection that really, I think is, I don't know, what attracts us to other people at the end of the day.
I love that. I had and I would call it an offsite, but it was bringing together all these remote people that we've worked together for over a decade, and we came together for a few days for this session years ago. And this was like the first time some of us had ever met now outside of a Zoom camera.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the workshop was, of course, work, but being an event producer by nature, I wanted to have fun. And so we had these activities planned for each night. And when you're traveling for work, you sometimes have to work longer hours than you would if you were at home. You have to go to dinners, you have to meet with clients, etc. And so we knew the days were going to be long, but we wanted to build in fun. And so I remember going to this one event years ago, and we brought this person to a Major League Baseball game for his first time ever. Like, it wasn't from the United States, had never been to a baseball game, was something on his bucket list. And when we ended up leaving this week-long work conference, one of the things we asked in the survey was, what was the most impactful part of your time here? And I was thinking, it could have been this session or that session or meeting this executive or that or whatever. And he said, going to the baseball game and having a hot dog in this Major League Baseball park. Yeah. And I think back and I can remember with clarity what that night was like in my mind right now. This is way over 10 years ago, but I can almost walk you through the steps of what it looked like. Like another colleague of mine came to a conference in Orlando, and we were going to a work conference, but it was Orlando. So of course I wanted to go to Disney World. And so I brought this person to Disney World for her first time ever. And I brought my kids with me because she had, we work remotely from home. So sometimes they would pop in on the camera. So we took her to Disney World, and I can tell you with the most vivid clarity what her face looked like when I was looking right at her when she saw the Magic Kingdom's castle for the very first time. And it was truly magical. And I'm not suggesting that you can't have good times in your work setting, sure. But if you are going to be with work people and all you do with your work people is just do work, then it's just work. Yeah. There is no cohesion, like I think what she's trying to get at in here. She talks about mentorship. She doesn't talk about coaching, but I think coaching is crucial to building good relationships at work. But the point of all of this in the chapter, and before we segue to go to the next one, because the next one is a little bit more sterile. It's about tidying up your meetings. But the point is here is if you're going to have people around you from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever your work hours are, get to know the people around you. And if you are communicating through social media, tidy up where you're investing, spending, and wasting your time, because you either are not adding value or getting value. And so if it's not matching one of those two things, then it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like time, I think is the key point that you make. And you talk about this all the time, right? Is like, what are we doing with our time? And that's one of the most critical things. And I think about that with relationships, like all these many connections. Where's your time worth, right? Like if you're only ever hitting this like little surface level, what's that really, is that building the life that you want? Is that building the work, life that you really want? And if not, those things are taking away time from the depth, the real meaningful relationships that you could be getting down to. And so there is extreme value in tidying up your network because it really comes down to where are you spending and investing your time. And if you spend so much of it on the surface, then you never spend enough of it in the depth. And again, when you're done, when you're retired, when you're done with this and all you're left with is legacy and the memories of what it is, what do you want to be left with, right? Like that's really what matters. And that's the question to really think about when you're thinking about your network, I think.
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to talk about meetings, and sometimes you can't control how your time is used up at work, but we're going to get into that next week. I always get so much value being with you, Sam. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for being a part of my network. I'm so happy that we are not just work colleagues, but we're friends. And for those of you that get the blessing of being able to have people that you work with that you also love being around, there's nothing like it. So I'm grateful to and for you, and listeners, for those of you out there that are our friends also, thank you for listening, because we appreciate you and we value that you are sharing our show with others that can get value from it as well. But for this week, my name is Denise Russo, and on behalf of my friend and colleague and coworker, Sam Powell, this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.